Gorilla. The night was moonless with this darker, a night suitable for the Lycans to act, but even so, the proper care should be carried out. It could be a simple mission, but it should be carried out perfectly. Any mistake that might happen could destroy William's plans and turn the easy occupation of Little Lorith into a long and tiring battle. The Lycans were to act as a modern, black ops. They could not stick to resistance battles. A means was needed for them to make the best possible use of their advantages. Soon William had discovered that the Lycans had some weaknesses, and when it involved fire and silver, fire was a very easy and quick means of counteracting the regeneration of the Lycans, and silver did the same thing. Among these things the worst was undoubtedly silver. When it came into contact with the bloodstream of the Lycans, besides preventing regeneration, it poisoned them. Their forces were eventually diminished and death would be certain if there was no help. Silver-poisoned Lycans are vulnerable to other attacks. It was something like a critical blow in a game. If he was suffering over the effect of silver in the bloodstream, the subsequent attacks ended up being more lethal. The effect of silver poisoning was weaker as tier of the Lycans went up, but it was still a very distinct weakness of them. On this mission, as he discovered, there were some special soldiers, the so-called Silver Guards, who wore an entire suit of silver parts. It could be said that 80% of their armor was made of silver, and their swords, by William's misfortune, were also made of silver. William's luck was that there were few silver guards, in total only 30, but they were still dangerous. A wound on a Lycan, tier 1 foot, and he would become fragile. Even if they were still strong, it was very dangerous for them. Their advantage was severely diminished. With this information, William was beginning to devise a plan to minimize these problems. The main idea was armor, but the problem was that there were no armor made for Lycans and no master blacksmiths in Lorith, and blacksmiths could plan nothing but iron mesh armor mostly made of leather, and it would still take time. For this battle it was necessary for them to face these problems without armor or way to maximize their defenses. The blame for this urgency came from William. He needed to get control of Lorith quickly to have time to stabilize it. In the shortest possible time he would have to go to the Targaryen and do something to take Dany away. He didn't care about Viserys, probably would abandon him for his own luck. A lunatic like him would probably live lost in the world until he met his death. Maybe William would kill him, but it all depends on the wishes of Daenerys. Since time waits for no one, William needed to be quick. He needed to settle things in Lorith and then go to meet Dany, and after that run to King's Landing to see how things were in the capital of Westeros. Looking at the Lycans around him, William began to transform his body into the Great White Tyrant, that day that would be remembered as the one who had his first tail contact the Conqueror of Lorith, the first time that the world would really know of the existence of the being that would from that moment known as White Dread. Even if it wasn't the only one of his titles, it would be special, because it would be one of the first that he would get. At that moment his body was infinitely close to 4 meters high. He was extremely intimidating. Even his form being majestic, it was impossible not to be afraid of such a big being with such a different appearance than we commonly see. William had realized that in a greater form his strength and resistance against damage would eventually be improved, and when he was less so his speed was greatly improved, but today he would initially choose his greater form, at least at first. When the Lycans saw their lord, they longed very much to be able to howl, to sing for their lord's glorious appearance, but they could not, and with the newly acquired discipline they remained in their places. Even if they were looking fervently at their glorious leader, they remained in position waiting for orders. This night would be memorable. But even so, the streets would be covered in blood. Shadows quickly passed through the streets over the houses and were rushing in one direction. That night many were able to perceive this event and with fear locked themselves in their homes and began to ask their gods for protection from these evil spirits. The city guards, or soldiers, of Lorith, had long been idle. With the disappearance of the money that was to be used to pay their wages, they wanted to stop working, but William paid them, using the money he had stolen, of course, but even paying for the wages of these men, William changed their obligations. Now they were just policemen, they were to repress crime, they would no longer be used in war. When these men saw the movement of the shadows they wanted to go check, but a beautiful brunette woman followed by 4 other women who seemed to be their bodyguards arrived and handed them a letter. In this letter there was William's order. That order was, "Do not meddle in the affairs of the city hall this evening." With this order they nodded their heads and closed their eyes. The suspicious movement involved the one who was now paying their wages. They were not fools to disobey. The Lycans were already in their positions, waiting only for their lord's order. William was standing in the shadows, sniffing the air. A map popped into his mind, and to his surprise a party seemed to be taking place inside the mansion. It wasn't a bad thing, it was just another chance for things to go according to plan. In his odor-generated mind map, William could see that there were about 1,800 people, probably close to 1,500 soldiers, and the rest were guests and their families, as well as the staff who were working at the mansion. A good portion of the soldiers were on standby. It would be a guerrilla battle of 370 Lycans were on the west side of the mansion and another 100 Lycans were on the north side. Those 100 would participate in the infiltration. William hoped things would work out. Mistakes should not be allowed. Waving his head in confirmation, the action began. A small group of 70 unprocessed Lycans had bows in hand, approached the mansion from the east side, set fire to the arrows and released them against the soldiers' dormitories. Shortly after the shooting for the second time, the soldiers located them and set off an alarm. A group of 300 soldiers began to go after those Lycans. With the attention of the soldiers on the east side, the Lycans attacked the west. Quickly and brutally the confrontation began. The Lycans would attack the soldiers were fragile, kill as many as they could and then retreat and attack in another direction. William would participate in the guerrilla attacks, but he would not be along with his soldiers. He would operate alone on the shore. He trusted his men's ability. Walking toward the wall, attacking small squads of soldiers, William began to enter a berserker atmosphere. It was very simple for William. All he needed to do was approach these inattentive soldiers, and with one blow from their claws they would die. But all this ease seen by William was not what these people saw. They could only feel dread. There were 5 soldiers walking around while they talked. They were talking about anything. They didn't pay much attention to the environment. Who would dare create confusion here? Surely for them this detail was surreal. It didn't make sense that someone would dare to create any form of disturbance in a place where the most important people of Lorith were gathered. But something was quickly approaching them. They had no idea that their deaths were so close. A great white figure arrived and ripped 2 of his friends apart with no chance of defense. When the other 3 went to react, their eyes ended up seeing a huge white monster looking at them. One moment their brains could not process the information and everyone was already dead. The Lycans' claws were brutal, but William's was the very definition of a reaper. Blood poured down the ground. The armor was simple leather ripped off like nothing. Even metal couldn't stop that attack. A mere hardened leather could prevent something. Perhaps just the chance of suffering for its users. After all, death was instantaneous to them. Gwermelhan was a mercenary close to retirement, until he received the proposal to become a captain for the magistrate's guard in Lorith. The salary was good and the life calm. There were not much problems in this place. Of course there was always some confusion, but for these things the soldiers of Lorith would act. So otherwise his job was to control a group of 100 men and serve as a guard for the magistrates, and once in a while do some crimes in their names. That night was special for the magistrates. They were more united than ever. An outsider had emerged and this lucky bastard with some speed managed to control a big slice of Lorith's business. Tonight the magistrates met using their old rules to face the outsider and then steal. I mean, take back what belonged to them. But then a strange thing happened. A recruit came running in and handed him some information. Sir, I have a message from Captain Lauren of the eastern area. The guard was out of breath. He must have run here. With a nod, Gwermelhan asked him to proceed. Sir, bandits shot arrows with fire in some places in the east wing. The guard managed to speak a little better, but he's still exhausted. And why would the west wing get involved at that point? The east wing has more soldiers than we do. Gwermelhan was an old man trying to enjoy this job as if it were a vacation. His days of chasing after other people's problems had passed long ago. Sir, the recruit tried to pass on the information, but enough, you're dismissed. Lauren is incompetent, but he'll manage. It's his problem, not mine. Gwermelhan paid no more attention to the recruit and started looking for a book on his bookcase. Fuck Lauren, Gwermelhan thought. With luck he might even get a raise when compared to his clumsy mate. He started reading some books until another soldier came to him. Sir, the soldier called attention and waited. Gwermelhan didn't want to pay attention, but the damn soldier stood there staring at him. What? Gwermelhan in a lazy voice asked. Sir, some garrisons are missing. The soldier reported it. They must have run away from their shift and gone to the edges. Gwermelhan spoke wickedly. There was some envy in his voice. Other men went after them and didn't come back either, sir. The soldier was trying to express his discomfort. It was normal for these soldiers to run away and go to a brothel, but today it was very strange. Usually they invite the others, but this time they just disappeared. Gwermelhan gave the order and turned his attention to the book. It didn't matter to him what these men were doing. Today he just wanted to read their books. Some time later, the soldier didn't wait for this lazy captain's reaction and delivered the message. Stop talking shit. Who would attack us? The evil ghosts of rumors. Gwermelhan asked in order to satirize the soldier's message. For him there were not those who could rival them. Who would care about Lorith? Sir, some bodies, partially devoured, were found. The ghosts are really attacking us. The soldier spoke with a little fear in his voice. Go away. Get out of here. Stop attacking me. Invent something better next time. Gwermelhan did not believe that these soldiers were trying to scare him, as they dared. The soldier looked at his superior with indignant eyes and left. He would run away. He was not paid to fight ghosts, not even his captain believed it was real, that they get hurt. Some time later heavy footsteps were heard. Gwermelhen was feeling that something was looking at him. The damned soldier must have come back. This time he wouldn't let this worm out easily, he was daring. Then Gwermelhen would show the price for being daring. Rising up in anger he took his chair and was intending to throw it at the soldier, but what he saw made him freeze to death. He was the damned soldier, but not in one piece. Something big and grey was there holding half of something that one day was the soldier, while holding the remains the grey beast looked at him with a satire look. Darak began the infiltration. Things in Lorith turned out to be simple, there was nothing close to military discipline, and the morale of these soldiers was low. They spent most of their time running away from their services and going to the edges, on duty drinking or gambling. Today the price was paid. With speed the attackers led by Cheese opened a breach in the defense of the mansion and with effort their attacks took the attention from the west to the east, where the other Lycans began to be part of the regiment led by Cheese. The soldiers who had followed the 70 Lycans who were in human form were ambushed by Cheese and easily killed. Even if they were a large group, close to 250, they were attacked by a larger, 2x, group. The Lycans quickly surrounded them and killed them. At that time the existence of the Lycans was unknown, so their appearances served as a means of diminishing the fragile morale of these soldiers, and with the lack of military discipline, when they ran out of morale they tried to run, but unfortunately for them, at that time most of their enemies were to be slaughtered. They did not even try to fight to defend themselves, it was almost as if they knew they were going to die, and with that they desperately tried to escape. A bad option. Lycans were perfectly bred to be hunters. With the soldiers trying to go and check what was happening, Darak managed to infiltrate successfully, quickly hunted the captains and then headed for the mansion. It was a massacre, everyone was terrified of the Lycans, they were sheep trying to run from a wolf. If they were not afraid and tried to face them, things would be more difficult, but luckily the existence of the Lycans was hidden, their physical advantages added to the effect of fear which shook any and every moral existence that the enemy could have. However, the silver weapons proved to be great enemies of the Lycans, even with all the disorder, almost as much as the attack against the Dothrakis who were drunk or asleep. Here all the soldiers were exhausted by being on their feet for many hours. The casualties caused by a miserable 30 soldiers using silver were 8, a number greater than the deaths caused in the battle against the Dothrakis if taken in proportion. In that battle there were 9 deaths, in a battle at a numerical disadvantage, and in that operation at a numerical advantage, they ended up having 8 casualties. Of course it should be visualized that when entering the mansion the Lycans separated and tried to maximize the amount of deaths, thus being easier for the silver guards to surround them with numerical advantage. Of the 100 Lycans who participated in the invasion against the magistrates, 8 were killed and 5 were weakened due to silver poisoning. It was necessary to create armor for the Lycans urgently, or in future battles when their existence is not so frightening, perhaps large numbers of them would die. But that operation has been a success so far, at which point it remains to take up the defensive positions. 17 comments 0 vote. Where to go? William was sitting in his mansion. Now the service was in the hands of his men. He just had to wait. In fact he could have done it from the beginning, but he chose to go along with others beyond raising morale, to satisfy his will by battle. On the table in front of him was a long sword of a metal lighter and brighter than iron. The sword was long enough not to be a medium sword and was short enough not to get in the way of a fight inside a large residence. The blade was sharp and the handle was sophisticated, more like an artifact than a weapon. Cursed silver sword. William cursed. Even if they were beautiful swords, these weapons were the Lycans' greatest enemies. Luckily the use of silver weapons and armor was rare because of the price. These extravagances would only be found in rich places that tried to squander their riches. Funny enough this squandering turned out to be a great idea for them. Even if in the end it wasn't used properly, it was definitely a headache for William. William moves his hand to the silver blade and lets a cut be made on his index finger. He feels a slight itch on his finger, but soon it stops and everything goes back to normal. Even if these weapons had advantages over the Lycans, it wasn't the same for their lord. When the silver came into contact with William the damage was much less, it just created discomfort and hurt a little more, but these weapons couldn't stop his regeneration and couldn't even weaken him. However, it must be said that the use of silver was much more useful against William than any other material until then. It would be as if of all the resistance to solids the resistance against silver was the only one that William did not possess. The damned weakness of silver was a predisposition of the Lycans, and from what everything indicated it was accentuated in beings who went through the ritual. It was as if silver tried to separate man and the monster, making a way to trap the monster and force man to appear, and as William was 100% a Lycan, the effect of silver on his bloodstream ended up being different. Perhaps only a much larger amount of silver was needed. But it was undeniable that armor was needed, and William had already ordered Lilith to look for blacksmiths and master blacksmiths to make them. Now it was necessary for him to wait. At some point those armors would be created. Looking at the little ornate box in the corner of the room, William wondered, would his plans work? There were so many eggs. He wished to use a way to gain control over the dragons in the same way the Targaryen and other people of Valyria did, and to do that he needed to do something that one of the scrolls he read in Castle Black made him think of. This would be a ritual to connect his blood and spirit with the dragons, to make a predisposition for them to be connected, but this was something that could only be desired unrealized. The rituals he knew until now did not help him to do that, but those books he read in Lorith were undoubtedly useful. He knew that the probability that some ritual connected the Valyrians with the dragons should be possible, and knowing that the people of Valyria always tried and tested several experiments in different places, was another point for him to believe that at some point he would discover how exactly to do that. At the time he had only the basis of an idea on how to do something that was merely like that, which would be the ritual he used to create Lycans, using blood and spirit to make other beings follow in a predisposed way another being, but for now the form of the beings that followed him was the same. The basis was human. He needed to find a way to go beyond that limit. There were some things William had discovered that could help him. In a book he read about a certain place that needed a son of Valyria to access, William planned to take Daenerys to that place, and hopefully he would find a way to control the dragons. There was so much to do that it began to stress him, but to organize his ideas he began to organize them. 1. Control Lorith and use this place as a base for anything he wanted to do. Leave Lilith as mayor of the city as he prepared to leave. As he had complete confidence in Lilith's loyalty and ability, it was the best choice, and at any time he wanted, he could go into her mind or some Lycan close to her and see the things that were being done in Lorith. 2. Travel to Pentos and meet the Targaryen. Create a way for him to take Daenerys with him when he goes out. Everything needed to be fast. He couldn't roll too much. The proper thing was to go out with her wanting to go out, but if it was not possible, he would have to kidnap her. Acting against her will could generate various frictions with her, but it was necessary. After that point things would start to get more hectic, and it probably wouldn't be long before wars started, but this time William would make the North go to war in a different way than the reason for the series. A few light steps began to echo in his direction. The door opens, and a beautiful brunette woman enters, Lilith of course. With a small bow and returning to her normal posture, she smiles and begins to tell the news. Lord was a success, all the necessary places are being controlled, and the soldiers who ran away show no desire to participate again in any movement contrary to our control. Lilith speaks with a voice full of satisfaction. Most of the plans had been devised by her after all. But the Prince of Harvest fled to Bravos, we couldn't catch him. He was the only one who managed to escape, but there is no big problem. In case the Lord Quero, we can send some Lycans to hunt him down and murder him. Lilith continued speaking with a somewhat disturbed look. Even if the operation was a success, all the leaders and their heirs were beheaded. The escape of a person who possesses a title was something that irritated her. William remained a moment in silence contemplating the sweet news. Everything was moving in the way he wanted. Send some men after him, but first investigate whether he is planning something or spreading information. We must prepare for countermeasures before killing him. William gave the order. He did not wish to leave things to chance. Even if the odds of this old man creating something evil for him were small, he might end up telling delicate details or even complicating William's future life. Lilith nods her head slightly in agreement and then resumes talking about the next steps. Lord, the next step of the plans must begin to be executed. We need to hire human soldiers and occupy the territories of Lorith which are on the continent. It may be a small bay with few people, but it is still a part of the territory. It is also necessary to create a title for you, and then we need to indoctrinate the people of Lorith in a way that are loyal to you, and then Lilith began to speak in a fervent way. It was almost as if he was a devout believer speaking of his cult of his god, speaking of ways so that more people could reach the light. I'll be the hidden leader for now, but you shouldn't be sure about my name. Not now. For now we need to hide any information, the title of lord or whatever, it'll have to wait. William answers promptly. He wanted to be crowned lord of that territory, but it was still early, and if things were done prematurely many problems could happen. It could be considered an aggression from Westeros, and the Free Cities Alliance would retaliate. In that scenario all would be lost, and William and his people would have to retreat quietly with their tails between their legs. King Baratheon could ask William to return the territory so as not to create trouble for Westeros, or even ask William to pledge allegiance to him, causing the territory to be placed within the king's control. So many other scenarios could happen. At that time the ideal was to act as a big company and focus on increasing wealth, and with that on the number of soldiers, everything should be handled with care. Lilith, we'll be like a big company. I can't show myself now, and this company must be controlled by capable people. You must understand what I want. William began to express everything he wanted. It was somehow his lack of responsibility to do so. But he planned from the beginning to be supported by the shadows, and that even if this emerging nation were to become a great power, by the time things in Westeros needed it, he would use only hidden help. He would start walking alone again. He would need to run after his goals. At some point he would come back and be the lord they wished to have, but for now it was time for him to be just someone's nephew again. The time for the journey to Pentos was coming. 31 comments, 0 vote. Wolf. Sitting on his bed with his back against his bedside, William tried to read one of his favorite books, leafed through it slowly, and his eyes sparkled from time to time. Lying sideways with her head on his leg thighs was a beautiful young woman who also had a book in her hands. It was a nice, harmonious scene. Although the world outside was hectic, these two were somehow trying to enjoy some time together. The room was spacious, but it was nowhere near the old glamour of their mansion. But as an excuse not to use several rooms, these young friends started sharing the same room, the same bed. However, why was everything different? Well, a few days ago William, Emily, and a few others left Lorith and were on their way to Bravos. The place where they were staying was the largest room on the ship. Even if it was beautiful, if you paid attention you would smell a strange smell in the air. Because they were confined inside a William and Emily ship, most of the time they stayed inside the room reading books, talking, telling stories, telling about their dreams, and enjoying each other's company. Before leaving Lorith, William had chosen a few new people to transform into Lycans, and with effort, he managed to balance the ratio between men and women, all having the same value, but now it was necessary to enable the natural continuity of the Lycans. The number of Lycans that eventually became William's current limit was 1417, and most of them were women. He commissioned Cheese and Darak to train all the Lycans, and with a special focus on those assigned to be in the special force, and those who did not wish to participate in military acts directly. Lilith, who had been in charge of the management of the whole Lorith, would choose where to place them by having these people participate in an indirect way, or even in the logistics she would decide. For the time being, Lilith was also in charge of taking care, together with Cheese and Darak, of the selected Lycans to act as spies, but at some point, it would be necessary to find a talent for this area. In fact, several points had to be looked at and several specialists needed. It would take years for Lorith to be perfect. For all of William's plans, things would take even longer if he didn't try to expand. Among the many orders given before leaving, in addition to building more docks and farms to support a greater number of soldiers and civilians, William asked that the hills and mountains that separated Lorith from Norvis be searched. Probably good iron mines could be found in those regions, and with luck, some precious metal could be found. A certain share of the profits would also be used to try to bring artisans, blacksmiths, and all those who possess some talent in manufacturing to Lorith, as well as, of course, to collect money and discreetly buy as many immaculate ones as they could. William chose to leave with a small convoy of 8 ships, in which, besides a few reliable men who would remain in Bravos to start developing the infrastructure of the company in place, a part would follow William for the rest of the trip, but still, it would be something much more discreet. Emily had asked William to stay for a while in Bravos. She wanted to see her sister before she left, but still it would be something quick, at most 2 days, and then they would travel back to Pentos. Will, did you know I'd stay like this? Emily began to question William in a strange tone. Of course he did, William answered provocatively. She stood up, looked into his eyes, and began to tickle his belly. How dare you? She made up all the excuses, but you're actually a little naughty. Emily, in her lecture tone, continued to speak as she tried to teach him a lesson. William acted as if he were guilty and tried to avoid Emily's dangerous hands. Well, before William left, he made sure he could turn Emily into a Lycan. The ritual was much more complex than the previous ones. In addition to using his blood to draw hieroglyphics on Emily's back, arms, and forehead, it had to be a full moon, and some sacrifices had to be made, those being gold, silver, some rare resources like wyvern's bone, and finally, some animals to be the harvest of life. All these sacrifices were arranged together in small cauldrons, and as William's spirit tried to make the connection, these sacrifices would boil and their gases would vanish in the night. After the ritual of the sacrifices had been performed, it was necessary for William to keep the song in the ancient language of the forest people until the shadow of a wolf appeared in place of Emily's shadow, and then things were done. Then new things began to emerge. As time passed, certain acts of the Lycans began to show strength, strong traits of how their culture was developing. The most outstanding traits would be loyalty to the members of their species, fanaticism for the strong, a greater willingness to participate in physical activities such as dances, fights, and even work, apart from small acts such as staying up late at night or preferring to do group activities even if they could be done individually. With these traits, certain qualities emerged, is that due to the loyalty it was difficult to see one Lycan treat another with lack of respect. The hierarchy was without a shadow of a doubt something respected that was a very good cultural trait, but the others were different. The greater willingness to participate in parties could be said to be a common trait of several cultures, so there was not much to talk about, only the form of dance, music, and sports was different, more focused on demonstrating the physical talents of its people. However, when we came to the veneration of strength, we came to a peculiar characteristic of this new people. The idea was simple: the strong is venerated, just as someone venerates an actor. Or similar. Basically the same principle, but in a much more intense amount. In general, all Lycans ended up choosing partners through this vision. Men with more than one wife was common if he was strong, and the same rule applies to women. The stronger the woman, the more likely she was to have more than one husband. But things aren't entirely like that, just a large enough amount to say it was a cultural act. Usually, when the strength between the parties was similar, they didn't find new partners, but the rule could get strange when the strength was disproportionate. Even if the trait was peculiar, it did no harm. Everyone respected each other for it, and the problems arising from these acts were no greater than the common acts of any other society. The problem that Emily pointed out was due to these inherent habits of his kind that were manifesting themselves in her. Besides beginning to respect William almost fanatically for being the patriarch and the most powerful Lycan, she ended up being guided by her other instincts, which made her libido a little out of control. These little problems are common in Lycans were awakened. They end up embracing each new detail very tightly, and only after some time, they manage to regain total control over themselves. The traits that ended up being out of control differed from one individual to the other, usually ending up extrapolating in something they liked or that they ended up doing for habits, such as hunting, fighting, dancing, eating, and having sex. Sexual intercourse is common when new Lycans have a wife or husband, girlfriend or boyfriend. It was at the same time a form of uncontrol for pleasure as an explosion of their breeding instinct. These special traits of the Lycans were also accentuated in the full moons, causing several cultural activities to be held in those days. For Emily, it was a combo of all this, and things ended up being driven to a very high level. Even if it was strange to see someone acting unnaturally, someone who acted most of the time with a little maturity started playing like a crazy fan who ended up conquering her idol, it was something that would soon calm down. Even if throughout the trip this problem was only amplified due to the closed environment, it was something passing. William tried to comfort her. It was only until she got control of herself, but maybe it was a little more difficult because William had so much natural veneration for who he was, which would cause any Lycan to die for him. Emily, who was nudging him, began to hug him and rub his head on his chest in a way similar to a small wolf seeking attention from his parents. "I know, but you don't help me," Emily started complaining again. Things turned out to be similar all the way through. After diverging from other activities, the instinct always returned at some point, and things got different, and the cycle continued. A knocking sound came from the door. William stood up, carefully pulling away a small wolf with moist eyes, and walked to the door. On the other side was a young Lycan who served as William's maid and bodyguard. "We have arrived in Bravos, my lord." The young Lycan passed the message on to William and then slowly left. William looks at Emily and had to drive her away. "We're in Bravos, we shouldn't be late." William wanted to go to see Amelia quickly, and then as quickly as possible he wanted to go to Pentos. Emily gets up quickly and grabs William. "We can do that later, but maybe we won't have time in those 2 days." Emily. The trip turned out to be in vain. Amelia left a few days ago for Volantis. She was going to study with her aunt for a few months. With plans being streamlined, William said goodbye to several of his followers who would stay in Bravos. The journey quickly followed its course, but a few weeks later, they would be in Pentos. 20 comments, 0 vote. Download the app for greater interaction. You can chat with me about my writing experience apart from the comments section. IngloriusEnd. Download app now. Pentos. The ship was slowly approaching the port of Pentos. This city was huge, many times bigger than Little Lorith and perhaps bigger than Bravos. This free city is located between Bravos, which was in the north, and Volantis in the south. Being east of King's Landing directly through the narrow sea, it is a place surrounded by fertile coastal plains which are known as flatlands. The basis of this great free city's wealth comes mainly from trading and cheese marketing, often treated disparagingly as cheese sellers. In Pentos, wealth equals power, and is governed by a prince and a council of magisters. The prince ends up having only a ceremonial function, something like what happens in Lorith, but here the princes are chosen among the 40 richest families in the city and preside mainly over dances and parties. William looked at this glorious merchant city, its buildings that resembled ancient Greek structures with some mixture of the typical architecture of the desert region of Essos, which was similar to the ancient Persian structures. The beauty and splendor of this place was impossible to miss. Several ships were arriving, while countless others were leaving. The trade was alive and robust. What do you intend to do by coming here? You haven't told me yet. Emily, who stood next to William, questioned him. They were almost at Pentos, and he still hadn't talked about his motives. It was bothering her. My uncle asked me to come here, William replied vaguely. He couldn't say he was here because he wanted to see another woman, could he? Emily looked at him for a second and then spoke again. You're anxious. Is there something here you want? Emily asks again. William moves a little uncomfortable. He was really here for several reasons, but one of the strongest was knowing an idol of his. He was just like many other Game of Thrones fans, one of those who loved the Mother of Dragons. Well, it's my uncle's mission, but I really want to see something that's here. William began to explain things as the ship approached the harbor. He tried to speak in a way that would lessen the impression that they were there especially to see another woman. It's the Targaryen. My uncle asked me to get in touch with them, and I'm really looking forward to meeting them. William looks at Emily and starts smiling to cover his slip. The ancient lords of Westeros. It makes sense that the hand of the king wants to know about them, but wouldn't it be easier just to have them killed? Emily looks at William with a little understanding. Things started to make more sense. I must also say I have some plans for Miss Targaryen. William decides to spice up her mood a little and talks in a way that provokes Emily. She looks at him and poses as, what about me with that? Then she turns her eyes the other way, trying to avoid eye contact with him, a way of ignoring him. William approached her and tried to tap her shoulder, but she dodged. A jealous woman can be a very sweet thing sometimes. Sometimes. William starts to laugh. I want to know more about her blood. William spoke, masking part of the truth and trying to make Emily lose her jealousy. She looks at him with a dubious look. I have 7 dragon's eggs. Well, I believe they're all in good condition. Maybe there's a way to make them hatch. Quote. William tried to explain the details better. When she heard this new information, Emily took her hand to her mouth and covered it. Emily's muffled voice came out of her hands, her eyes showing amazement at the information. Are you serious? Emily began to get excited. William was already so powerful and the Lycans already possessed so much potential. What would happen if he could control dragons? He could create a kingdom as powerful as Valyria was. Perhaps he could even go beyond what Valyria's kingdom had accomplished. William held her shoulders firmly. It's a secret. I told you because I trust you, but don't talk about it anymore, William spoke in a voice. But it's still just a test. There's a lot to do before, William tries to explain. It was a little unfair to Emily because William knew how loyal each Lycan was to him. He knew full well that she wouldn't betray him, and that her act would only make her more excited about trust. But it's natural for people to keep some information to themselves, but he knew she had some secret from him, and it made him want to pressure her into telling it, but he controlled himself. Curiosity was strong, but he would control himself. Sure, I can be trusted, I'll never betray you. Emily speaks, somewhat moved by William's sharing yet another secret with her. She holds tightly to the bar of his dress and thinks she should tell his secret to him. But it was still too soon. It was a family secret, not just hers. She could not break the trust of her relatives. It was tormenting her. There with a rich merchant. I need to get close to him and then find a way to get to the Targaryen. William began to explain the details of his future acts. Talking to Emily, they sent some of the Lycans who were following them as bodyguards to look for the necessary information. It had to be known that the only information William possessed until now was that they were in Pentos at the home of a wealthy merchant. Not even the merchant's name was spoken and the town was ridiculously large and populous. It was not so simple to find the location of anything. With all the guards being sent to look for information about the Targaryen, William and Emily started looking for an inn to spend the night. They could find a small mansion and settle in, but it wasn't worth it. They didn't plan on staying more than a few days here. As quickly as possible, they were to find the Targaryen and then convince Miss Targaryen to go with them. William convinced Emily that they needed to figure out a way to take the girl named Daenerys, because his brother Viserys was crazy and it wasn't very good to hang out with crazy people, was it? Emily had told them to kill Viserys and kidnap Daenerys, but William went against that first plan. It was too risky, and it could create hidden problems. Maybe Dany hated them forever. If they chose to do that, it would be very sad for him. It couldn't happen, it would be disastrous at the very least. Therefore, at first, the plans would be, after finding the Targaryen, find a way to create a relationship with the nobleman who was hosting them and then get away to get close to the Targaryen. William and Emily eventually chose a good lodge that was almost as expensive as the price of a few houses in Lorith. It was a dazzling place, and they would enjoy this interim until they solved this mission as if it were a vacation period. The next morning one of their guards arrived and brought the information he so wanted. They discovered the trader's information and where he lived. Now all it took was for William to find a way to get close. The merchant's name was Illyrio Mopatis. To make things difficult, he is a merchant prince and magister of Pentos, someone who was in a high hierarchy. William would need to use his wealth to get closer, things would have to be more wasteful, and otherwise, he would not be able to get close to his goal. I've seen the time skip tips. I'll try to pay more attention and do that. Sometimes I get caught up in ideas. Sorry. That chapter I think is still stuck, but I had already written this chapter. IngloriusEnd creators' thoughts. 16 comments 0 vote. How to trick a little madman. William was a few days away in Pentos and at that time, he was forced to interact with the feudal nobles in order to somehow get closer to his goal. Yesterday a fortuitous event took place. The wealthy merchants of Pentos held a large auction at which large quantities of ancient relics and works of art were sold, many things were taken away, and the money came in explosive form. To commemorate this great event, the magistrates decided to do what they knew best how to do besides making money, and this is a celebration. A grand ball was being planned, and for William's happiness, he had been invited to attend. William stood in front of Emily, hoping she would help him choose the outfit for the occasion. Emily looked at him with glowing eyes, and he looked great in that outfit. It was a dark blue noble garment with gold details, a thinner tunic than those worn elsewhere because of the warmer weather in the area, but it still kept the air of luxury necessary for such events. William turned and went to the mirror. How do I look? William questioned as he tried to see himself. Emily with a little smile went up to him and pinched his ass. Very charming, Emily answered as he adjusted small details back into William's clothing. William looked at Emily again and smiled. The hours were flying by. William must have been luxuriously dressed or just problems would arise from this trip. The more he flaunted the greater the chances of everything going well. For this suit he chose the most expensive outfit he had ever worn. It was an outfit that cost enough to buy a ship. Slowly entering the carriage he had hired, William began to be taken to the place where the party would be held, in this case, the party hall at Illyrio Mopatis's mansion. Arriving at the site the view was dazzling, a grand mansion that stamped that its owner was incredibly rich. Waiters and guards were everywhere. William calmly entered the room and was bombarded with a colossal amount of smells. There were simply too many people gathered there. Would it be a little difficult to find the Targaryen? Obviously not. Their gray hair made it easy for William to locate them. Near the center of the hall where many lustfully dressed men were chatting, was the owner of the Illyrio Mopatis place, and a bit shy, but still close to him was Viserys Targaryen. Viserys was wearing a noble outfit, but of not so expensive value. It was luxurious but also simple. He was a guest of this place, a wager or investment from Illyrio. Even if Illyrio Mopatis was a defender of the Targaryen house, he could not force others to take this young man seriously. What made Viserys to be left aside? Only small words were addressed to him, which made him act as if he was in control of everything. The little madman acted like a king, but was treated like someone who had sold his sister to the Dothrakis barbarians, which was the only reason that allowed them to interact with Viserys. If the engagement of Daenerys and Khal Drogo did not exist, Viserys would be forced to remain in the rooms of the mansion hidden from prying eyes. William looked around trying to find the special person, the great Daenerys of the Targaryen house, but unfortunately, the women had not yet begun to attend the party. Now it was time for the men to talk business, only after some time would they enter. Without wasting time, William went to talk to Illyrio Mopatis and the little madman of the Targaryen house. William quickly began to talk to these rich pigs and insinuated that he wanted to buy some merchandise and maybe some land in Pentos. Things that eventually caused some of the merchants to start explaining what products would be good to sell and where to sell them. They tried to make their product look more valuable than it really was. William only pretended to be interested, but he evaded all these good deeds, and began to ask about the Dothrakis, and what was happening near Marine. The merchants spoke of several rumors, little new information, but one thing caught William's attention. One of them said he heard from someone that Khal Drogo had already solved his problems and was coming to Pentos. Viserys' attentive ears picked up this information, and a sardonic smile appeared on his face. William decided to talk to the little madman. Hello, my name is William, what would your illustrious name be? William asked Viserys in a noble way, trying to make Viserys sit flattered. Viserys, who was smiling because of information about his brother-in-law, was surprised that anyone began to talk to him. I am Viserys of the House Targaryen, Legitee, a guest of Mr. Mopatis. Viserys spoke, almost revealing his true face, but with a slight facial distortion he spoke again while smiling. Viserys Targaryen, the dragon of Westeros, I have heard much about your highness. William pretended to be surprised and tried to act as if he were honored to be in the presence of this illustrious man. Viserys could not stop a smile from dominating his face. This fellow's ego is a serious problem. Even if he was a prototype villain, he was undoubtedly one of the simplest people to deceive. His ego was a great weakness. It was as if he couldn't think of the possibility that someone might deceive him. The conversation between the two of them continued. William tried his best to make Viserys feel good about him, and things were going well. With many words given, William was trying to pass himself off as a great merchant who owned as many ships as the Dothrakis had horses. Viserys naively ended up taking much of what William spoke as the truth. This poor little madman was actually very alien to the things of the world. You come from Westeros? Viserys asks, surprised at the information. Yes, your highness, in Westeros the houses still remember their true lords. William began to deceive Viserys in a deeper way, eventually lying that it would be simple for Viserys to regain the Iron Throne and that things were easier than he imagined. It was only a sadness that someone from the Targaryen family was married to a Dothraki barbarian. It's really unfortunate that someone of noble blood has to marry a barbarian, but that barbarian has 50,000 men. Viserys began speaking in a benevolent way, as if the unhappiness that was happening to his sister was not his fault but King Baratheon's for forcing him to have an army. With a few more words, William supported Viserys' motives and said that when the time came, he would offer his ships to take the Dothrakis to Westeros and then regain his throne. Of course, it was all just a trick. William was just creating an easier way for him to interact with Daenerys. At that moment, William realized that women were entering the ballroom. His eyes kept looking for someone. He was feeling anxious. The time was here, and soon she'd be here. Then a 14-year-old girl with white hair and violet eyes, possessed of overwhelming beauty, an almost inhuman beauty, wore a simple, delicate blue dress that, though simple, couldn't diminish her beauty. She slowly descended the stairs while she was accompanied by two maids. Daenerys was very beautiful, her facial features, her delicate body, and she was without a doubt a beauty without parallel in the world. Dany's beauty was greatly enhanced in this magical world. William found himself holding his breath. The long-awaited moment had arrived, but it was too fantastic for him to keep from running to her, so he closed his fists tightly and tried to look away. Unlike the way William remembered her, the way she was after all the tragedies she should have experienced, she was now a shy, docile young woman, staring at the ground as she walked. She had so little self-esteem. William longed to care for her, but now looking at her, he could not control himself. He would care for her and help her to be strong to overcome her fears and limitations. He would help her to be stronger than she ever was, and he would prevent any tragedy from happening to her. William was still talking to Viserys, but it was inevitable for him to look at this beautiful girl from time to time. He began to confuse Viserys' thoughts and began to put forward the idea that Daenerys needed contact with other noblewomen and that William's older sister could help her become firmer and less docile, with which Dany could learn to control her future husband and make things simpler. Viserys began to like the idea. After all, if she could control the barbarian Dothraki, it would be too simple for him to regain his crown. The naive little madman eventually accepted, and the next day Daenerys would be taken to walk with William and his sister, and the next days Dany and William's sister would begin to interact more so that Dany would be well taught. With that as an excuse, William approached Dany. 15 comments, 0 vote. A dance. William using the excuse that he should talk to Daenerys so that she doesn't feel scared of having to go out with strangers in the next few days. With slow, nervous steps William moved toward the small, delicate woman who possessed an epic but tragic future, one who would be called the mother of dragons but would end up dead at the hands of her lover-nephew. Of the many things William could change, that person's destiny would surely be one he most desired to change. Daenerys was facing in another direction. She didn't see William approaching, and when he was near her, he couldn't control himself and didn't catch her eye with his voice, but rather took his hand lightly and leaned against the girl's arm. It was inevitable to try to feel and see this reality, even if a small slip of noble etiquette was accomplished. The maid-servants accompanying Dany looked at him with strange eyes, but luckily they were one of those women who could not react to the presence of a handsome man, thus causing William to slip out of that slip of etiquette with ease. But the little violet-eyed girl was eventually surprised by his act, and with a small display of panic in her eyes, she looked at him. For a few seconds that seemed like decades, a young man just over 15 and a young girl just over 14 exchanged a look, a strange look that was undoubtedly rare. William's gaze was mostly a display of affection that a fan would have for an idol, but there was also every demonstration of his willingness to protect her. No doubt there were even more feelings in his gaze, as was his delight in looking at such a beautiful young woman. But his gaze was greeted by an inexplicable hunger coming from this young lady. She in her deepest loves longed for something she found in this young man's eyes. She who was a little princess evicted from all her dreams, who was humiliated by her closest relative and who had been sold as a breeding mare without the slightest demonstration of affection, used as a mere object, betrayed in such a way, now had seen in the eyes of this boy something that she wished her brother to show her. It was a small connection between the soul of someone who by his nature was protective, with someone who by nature wished to be cared for. That small moment of connection was interrupted by the young man himself. "Hello, I'm William Corvinus. What would the beautiful young woman's name be?" William asked uncomfortably. He had most of the time a firm hold on himself. Now he was acting like a young man, he was acting his age. Danny was nervous. She communicated most of the time either with her maid servants or with her brother, and every time the conversation was simple, from her brother only oppression and from the maid servants it was something more futile, just empty conversation. But now, unlike at other times, someone wanted to talk specifically to her, trying to show some form of etiquette. She straightened herself as much as her shyness allowed and with a small gesture began to present herself. "Daenerys," she answered with a very light voice. It was a low and shy voice. She wanted to act at the height, but something about her still stopped her. William had hoped it would be something like that, but he was still a little short-sighted, and it was hard to talk to someone shy when that person made him feel the same way. But for him, a small amount of time was all it took to get back to who he really was. William makes a little joke. Even if it was so small and simple, the young woman who received the description had a slightly red face. She was very inexperienced. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Miss Daenerys." William leaves space for thought. It was a moment to force her to complete her name. Perhaps with luck, those small interactions would reduce the young lady's shyness. Danny for a second did not understand the pause the young man made in his speech. She was very nervous about interacting with someone of the opposite sex, so that she stayed for a second just looking into the beautiful blue eyes of the young man. In a way she had been frozen. She did not possess many social skills, but with the perception of what she should do she began to answer him with a little anxiety. "Targaryen. I mean, my name is Daenerys Targaryen." Danny answered quickly, trying to speak quickly to lessen her embarrassment. William replied with a small smile. He already knew who he was talking to. It was just a little formality of etiquette before the reason he came here. With a little persistence, William began to develop small conversations with Danny, slowly getting closer to being called friends. From time to time little laughs were exchanged, and the relationship between the young people improved. Most of the people who attended this party knew who they were dealing with when they saw white hair and purple eyes, but now perhaps once they saw a young man interacting with her for the young lady. A man in his early 30s approached. He was wearing a lightly pastel yellow garment, followed by two other men who were dressed the same way. With a cough, he tried to get their attention. When William and Daenerys looked, the man extended his arm toward Danny. "I'd do me the honor," the man said, insinuating that Danny would dance with him, but no surprise, she didn't understand what he was saying. The somewhat clumsy man spoke with a thicker intonation. He was angry to be ignored and was about to scream. "Dance with me." The second time he spoke he already showed that he didn't care about her wishes. Danny was nervous about what was happening. For being submissive to her violent brother, she was already used to these orders that hid threats from behind. She did not want to dance, but was afraid to say no. William, seeing this scene, had to stop it. William tried to interrupt subtly, giving the man a chance not to be humiliated. "Are you with her? If you look in the mirror, boy, wait a few years before you can talk to me." The man was showing his pleasantness. He couldn't see that William was being kind. With persistence and violence, the man tried to get close to Danny and drag her to dance with him. William would never allow that. With one quick movement he reached in front of the man and with one hand in the center of the man's chest he prevented him from continuing to walk. "Take off that damn hand." Ah! Several pairs of eyes looked at the scene. William was beginning to get angry, and his goodness was being revealed. Without giving the idiot any more opportunity, he pushed him around. The man fell like shit on the floor. Without waiting for the reaction of the idiot and his friends, William turned and, holding Danny's arm carefully, he took her to the dance floor. A handsome man and a beautiful woman stole everyone's eyes. It was a magnificent scene. About yesterday not have a chapter. Yesterday, a black cat crossed my way, so I had to take another way. Well, I was lazy and I didn't write, sorry. Today I'll try to post 3 chapters. Laughing face. IngloriusEnd creators' thoughts. 14 comments, 0 vote. Brides were made to be stolen. The party had been good, but this new day was being much better. It was a beautiful sunny day with a good breeze coming from the sea. even though it was not the main point for the walk that was happening now, no doubt was a factor to make things more pleasant. William was being accompanied by two beautiful women, all looking at these three beautiful people, a man to take the breath away from any woman, and two women so beautiful that they seemed to come from some fairy tale, one older than him and one younger. Much would feel mortal envy, he was rejoicing in their good fortune. Emily walked with a lot of dominance. Her attitude in public and with other people is always severe. Her easier personality was only directed to those close to her and mainly in private places. Her attitude in public was dignified and wild. Danny, on the other hand, acted like a small child, shyly followed her two new friends. She interacted with them from time to time, but still, in a coy way, she did not dare to act for herself yet. But slowly she gained more confidence, more experience in social relationships. Life is so good, William thought vaguely as he looked at his companions. He was here only for a short walk, and then he would go with Danny and Emily somewhere where they would improve the relationship. Ideas about what to do to entertain these two beauties was the only thing that remained in his mind. Where are we going, Will? Emily asks uncomfortable. She didn't understand why she acted so nicely with this girl. William didn't just need her blood. Why do you treat her so well? Of course, she knew through William that this poor girl had several problems, the biggest of them being her lunatic and violent brother. But weren't there several tragic people in the world? He didn't care about the others, why should he care about her? Emily looked at this beautiful young lady from time to time. It was inevitable for Emily to be uncomfortable with the things that were happening. She's very beautiful. William, you naughty bastard. Emily began to curse poor Lycan. Emily was afraid something like this would happen. Some other woman would come and somehow steal William from her. With a little discomfort, she held her hand close to her heart. Her little heart was uncomfortable. William, seeing Emily's reaction, couldn't help himself. He didn't want her to get hurt. He lovingly held her arm and smiled at her. Emily, watching William's action, felt a little more comfortable. A little walk. After him, we'll find somewhere to buy some jewelry and things to remember, William answered as thoughtfully as possible. He knew Emily was feeling uncomfortable about the things that were happening, but he wasn't here to get a second wife. He planned to take care of Danny, but it didn't have to be that way, didn't it? He wasn't very sure about his wishes. It is very difficult to be faithful to his wishes, is not it? Looking at the little young lady who was uncomfortable with the new things, he tried to comfort her. Danny, may I call you that? William questioned nicely while looking at her. Yes, of course. I don't mind, Danny answered shyly. It was all too new for her. Danny, what would you like to see or buy? William asked as he held on to his head so as not to caress this cute young lady. Danny was a little silent. She didn't know what to talk about. She always got the goods and was never questioned about her desires, at which point she felt lost. You choose. Everything is good for me, Danny answers weakly. To his bed then. You wouldn't mind, surely. Emily responded in a way that provoked her. She was already feeling uncomfortable about things that were happening, and this young lady's weak way could be sweet, but she was acting that way with William. And William already had one sister, he didn't need another. Danny didn't quite understand why William's older sister was upset, but she remained silent and looked down. William, seeing this, nudged Emily's ribs. Don't be mean to her, she doesn't usually walk around. William tried to defend the little lamb while he tried to relieve Emily's mood. Emily is a little bit resentful, but he looks with pity at this young lady. Emily decides to apologize, and it wouldn't have been her fault if it was William for being so hungry. Her accusing look turned to William, who responded with a cough and turned his eyes away. All right, I'd like to go to the bazaar and buy a jewel. Danny answered with a little more courage. She hated herself for being so shy. She was wanting to change, but it was so difficult. Jewel, what kind of jewelry would you like to buy? William asked, trying to relieve the strange air that was present. It's a dragon's jewel. I'm told the big bazaar is selling relics from Valyria. I always wanted to see some dragon and those jewels. Danny ended up getting excited about the new subject, and the conversation between the three ended up getting easier and more fluid. In time, Emily ended up getting closer to Danny and started acting like an older sister. Well, a protective big sister, not a strange big sister like she acted with William. It was inevitable that she wouldn't get attached to Danny. She was very cute, and her personality was easy to handle. Even if she was excited about her desires, she kept trying to please Emily, who was somehow close to her. They were close to the lookout. The streets were narrower here. It was a beautiful place to have a good view of all Pentos. Wow, this place is beautiful, William commented as he contemplated the atmosphere. Very beautiful indeed, replied Emily. Danny just nodded. She was holding up a dragon-shaped ruby necklace with little gold features that framed it. That was the gift William had bought her. She felt so happy with these new friends. She didn't want to leave. She preferred to stay with them, who were good for her. In a way, William was the brother she wished she had, and Emily was a sister she never dreamed she could get. How good it would be if they were my brothers of truth. Danny thought with some sadness. She had one of the worst kinds of brothers anyone could have. But what could she do? When they were leaving, they saw 3 men approaching. Oh, who we have here? The young man who needs to be taught a lesson was the damn man who asked for a dance with Danny at the party the other night. The 3 men blocked the path of the 3. Emily was ready to draw his sword and kill the 3 trash, but William stopped her and with a nod indicated they should withdraw. You didn't have to care about garbage, right? But the men didn't know the danger. Yesterday you humiliated me, today I will humiliate you, the man spoke as he drew his sword from its sheath. Come with daddy, I'll teach you to behave, after the beating I'll fuck those 2 bitches right in front of you, the man began to speak in a vulgar way as he walked toward William. William, looking at this scene, couldn't help but laugh. Are you crazy? But don't worry, it's going to hurt a lot. The odd eye for William's action, but he didn't care, after all, what a young man like that might do to him. Emily was already drawing his sword, but William stopped her again. She looked at him questioningly. Divert Danny's attention. She is too young, William instructed her thoughtfully. It'll be quick, he complimented his speech. Don't belong, Emily responded as he walked away with Danny. Danny tried to stop William from staying. She was nervous about the things that were happening. Come back here, I didn't let those bitches out. The man spoke as he pointed to his followers to stop them from leaving. William stopped in front of the 3. The first man shouted and ran with his sword raised to cover his head toward William. Do you want to dance? William asked when he saw that ridiculous scene. With a sideways move out of the way of this idiot's linear movement, William threw a quick punch to the man's unprotected neck. Because of the impulse, the man flied back. William wanted to play a little, but he couldn't control the strength correctly. Blood began to leak from the corpse's mouth. Too bad I don't dance with men, William replied as he smiled at the other 2 men. You're screwed, the other replied. Both drew their swords and ran to William, one on the left and the other on the right. Clever, William said. With one forward movement, he was faster than the men's reaction, causing him to escape this cock attack. With a roundhouse kick that would make Van Damme clap, the head of one of the men made an abnormal twist. A loud bang was heard. The second man was shocked by his friend's death so quickly. With no reaction, he took a kick in the middle of his chest that made him fly. To his misfortune, he passed over the small protective wall and plummeted over 30 meters. But they're not smart enough, William said satirically. William went to the wall and looked down. It was a nice fall. Following the path the girls used to get out, he soon found them. You took your time, Emily spoke in an unsatisfied manner. I felt like having fun. William apologized while he was passing the hand on his head. Danny stared at him worried, trying to see some injury. William saw this act of hers, and to comfort her he smiled and ran his hand over her head. It was nothing, he said. The little lady turned red with shame. A cough was heard. We still have places to go, Emily spoke jealously as he tried to get William away from Danny. Okay, William answered as he took a hand to hold hers. Emily gave a little smile and they kept walking. After a while, when they got ready to take Danny home, one of William's Lycans came running. Sir, I have some urgent news, the young man said as he tried to recover his bellows. William nodded to him and approached to hear the news. Khal Drogo and 20,000 Dothrakis have arrived, the boy said. William was a little frozen by the news. He waved his hands and pointed the young man back to the ship. William was thinking about what he might do now. Well, now there was only one thing left to do. Steal the bride and leave. 20 comments, 0 vote. How to steal a dragon. A storm had come so unexpectedly that it forced William to the wall. He had to act quickly or his chances of getting the bride down the drain. No way I'm leaving Danny here, let Drogo be satisfied with visories, William thought wickedly. What could be better than to steal a beauty and leave a trap behind for someone who would be your enemy from now on? William began to laugh internally. Maybe Drogo will be happy and marry visories if it isn't his bad luck. This playful idea came into his mind. Unable to control himself by the image he thought of, Drogo and visories getting married. It would be a good payment for that garbage who sold his own sister. Why did you start laughing like a lunatic? Emily asked while strangely looking at him. Danny was also looking at him with curiosity. One second his face showed concern and the next he started laughing. What a strange face, Danny thought. William tried to stop his smile, but it was impossible. Trying his best to stop himself, he tried to pretend it was for some reason. Something I've prepared has been accomplished. Come with me, I'll show you something. William began to speak strangely. Emily looked at it without understanding. They should take Danny home. Why does he want to show her something now? But we weren't ready to take her, Emily asked as he wondered about William's actions. Danny shrank when she heard it was time for her to return home. She'd rather stay here with them, it was much more fun for her. A carriage stopped and they boarded, heading for the harbor. Where are we going? Emily asked again, but before William answered, she had an insight and she understood something. She quietly raised her thumb to William, showing that she had understood. They were going to kidnap her. She approved of them leaving, even if the city was beautiful, she preferred to leave this strange place immediately. William realized that Emily had understood, and so he sidestepped the issue. Danny, you like dragons a lot, right? William asked the young lady who was suspicious that something was strange. Yes, they're very nice, very cute, Danny answered childishly, it was one of her favorite things. I have dragon eggs. William was trying to attract the girl's interest to make it easier for him to deceive her and take her away, but before he could speak his entire sentence, a white figure threw himself on top of him. Daenerys leapt from his seat to William's, began to hold his arm and look at him with puppy eyes. Really? Can I see? Daenerys started talking anxiously. William was a bit frozen by Danny's unexpected action, but he managed to react, even in a sillier way, and reacted. Sure, anything you want. William looked hypnotized into those violet eyes and answered empty. Hearing a cough coming from the other side, William and Danny regained consciousness and realized the bold acts she had done. Even if it was a simple act of holding another person's arm and standing slightly close to that person's face, that was a lot for someone who did not have much social experience. Danny's face turned red and she tried to return to her seat. I was planning on taking her to sea, but they're on my ship, it's going to take a while, okay? William trying to get back to his old polished way. It was so complicated to react in a normal way when someone you somehow treat in a special way attacks you. The carriage quickly arrives at the ship, Emily leaves alone and goes to see if everyone is close to the harbor so they can all leave. It would be sad to forget someone around here. She'll be back soon, William said. Danny nodded in agreement. She was nervous about being alone with William, but she trusted him. He was so good to her, he wouldn't do anything bad, right? Well, in a way, he would do only good things for her, even if she didn't realize it at first. William took her to his room and Danny came in strangely. It is here, in the chest, William spoke to diminish the distrust of Danny. He pointed to the chair in the corner of the room. Sit there, I'll take it on the table so you can see, William explained to her. Danny looked into his eyes and felt he wasn't lying to her. Okay, Danny answered and went to sit in the chair. She kept wiggling her fingers anxiously, she really wanted to see those cute little dragon eggs. William went to a corner of the room and inside a secret compartment, he pulled out a box that had 3 eggs in it. William carefully took the box to the table, placing it in front of him, and he slowly opened it. When the box opened, Danny saw 3 small dragon eggs, 2 were green and 1 was red. They were as big as an adult's head, and their body was enveloped in small scales that resembled the skin of a reptile. They were certainly beautiful things, they were like precious stones, but to those who know what they were, these eggs were priceless. Danny stretched out her hands to hold one of them but stopped before touching. With her desire filled, she looked at William and asked, "May I have one of them?" Danny asked while he was looking like a little puppy. "Sure, but be careful, they're heavy," William answered as he encouraged her to pick one up. With all possible care, Danny took the red egg, she held it and hugged it. She was very happy. They felt the ship move. Emily walked into the room and threw an excuse. It was very obvious it was a lie, but since Danny was paying attention to the egg, she just nodded. Sweet naivety, things turned out to be simple. She was being kidnapped, never to be returned, and she didn't even know it. Besides, she was happy looking at the dragon egg. Well, it was a good thing for her, but still funny. William stood next to her smiling, and now one of her problems was solved. After almost an hour, Danny realized something was strange. The ship still seemed to be moving, and it seemed to be faster than before. Shouldn't we have stopped? Danny asks with an interrogative look. William, who was reading a book while waiting for her to notice the news, raised his eyes and closed the book. He walked slowly toward her. Well, things have changed. William started talking slowly. A little fear arose in Danny's eyes and she stood up as she hugged the dragon's egg. What do you want? My brother will. Danny started trying to change William's mind. She was afraid of what he wanted. Don't be afraid, I only want your good. William spoke calmly as he tried to get closer to her. Don't come close. Danny spoke as he retreated carefully. Okay, calm down. It looks. Drogo arrived in Pentos. I could not allow your brother to sell you. William speaks to ease her fear. Danny was frightened by the information. The man your brother sold her to had arrived. She was more scared. She had no way out of it. And why do you care? Danny asked suspiciously. Because I care about you, William spoke bluntly, trying to make her relieved. We want your well, Emily, who was walking into the room with a tray of food, supported William's speech. Danny was left with no reaction. Could good people like that really exist? She didn't think so. Tell me, why do you care? She tried to demand the answer. Everything was so strange, she didn't know if she could trust them. William looking at her reaction, he didn't know what to do. We really like you, but... Emily started talking, but stopped and looked at William. She thought Danny should know the whole truth. It would be unfair to deceive her even in part. I need something you have, but in return, I'll give you something, William answered calmly, but he wasn't sure if it would help or make it worse. Danny knowing they wanted something from her made her calm down a little. If they wanted something, she'd help with it and it would all be settled, right? What would that be? I have nothing with me. Danny spoke wanting William to keep talking. I need your help with something. That is, your blood, William spoke impulsively. It was obvious that Danny would be frightened by this information and took a few steps back. My blood. Danny let out a little scream while she was scared. Calm down. I don't want your harm. It will be just a little bit, almost nothing, William spoke more carefully. Why do you need my blood? Danny asked to see if it was true or just a trick. Do you know the story behind your house? William spoke as he pointed to the eggs. Danny looked at it, and a gleam of perception appeared in his eyes. Dragons. She spoke dubiously. Yes, I have a method to wake them up, but first I need to do some things, and one of them would be the blood of a son of Valyria, William spoke with excitement as he approached her. Are you serious? She asked less carefully as she approached him. Yes, and if I do, that egg will be yours, William spoke excitedly as he pointed to the red egg Danny held in his arms. Danny looked at the egg in her arms and a little smile was born on her lips. And then I'll give you the freedom. I won't let you marry a barbarian who's old sufficient to be your father, William spoke protectively, perhaps she'd be happier about it. Danny looked down and didn't answer. After all, he was controlling her fate and saying he was giving her freedom, but she knew she'd be happier about it, so she was reassured. What other things do you need? Danny asked as she sat back in his chair. We're going to the Summer Islands. There everything we need will be found. It will only take a little time, William replied as he was relieved. She had accepted the idea that she was being kidnapped, in a calm way, but there was still some resentment in her eyes. There are many secrets on the Summer Islands, and a little adventure between a Lycan and a little dragon would happen. What do you think? Drogo's taking Viserys as his wife. Ha 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 ha, that idea makes me laugh like a fool. Drogo walks up to Viserys and says, no. Viserys desperately tries to run away from the barbarian's arms and answers, no fucking way. IngloriusEnd creators' thoughts. 28 comments, 0 vote. Strange creatures. Soon small islands began to appear on the horizon. Finally, after several days, they had arrived in the Summer Islands. This place has a very interesting history, but what makes William come here are the secrets that the ancient lords of Valyria hid very carefully on one of these islands. The Summer Islands are an archipelago in the Summer Sea. It's located southeast of Westeros and southwest of Volantis. The inhabitants of these islands are among the greatest sailors in the known world. Their swans sail faster than any other ship of the Ironborn, are made of rare wood that can withstand any attack. The inhabitants of this island are also excellent archers. Their bows made of gold heartwood are capable of firing arrows strong enough to pierce steel plate armor, even from a great distance. Every detail about the Summer Islands is interesting. It was inevitable that William would covet this place, but unlike Lorith, the world paid much more attention to this place, which made any plan to dominate this territory have to wait. We're almost there. There's no need to get angry. William was trying to lessen Daenerys' mood. The last few days of coexistence were complicated. Even if she was happy with her winnings, she felt betrayed by those she met. She said nothing, just walked toward her room and began to wait. Don't worry, she'll get over it soon. Emily spoke with a look of confidence about what she had said. William nodded and saw her walk toward Daenerys' room. Even though Danny felt betrayed by their behavior, she ended up forgiving her friend more easily and treated him so differently. She's got a little trauma with men. Damn Viserys, William cursed in his mind. If it weren't for that lunatic's fault, things would be so much simpler. Everything was more complicated because of one person who didn't even matter anymore. It was so frustrating. Well, what mattered was that now they had arrived on the Summer Islands. They weren't here for anything everyone knew. They were here for one of the secrets of the people of Valyria. A tomb hidden in the middle of the sea, made by the people of Lorith by the order of an ancient great lord of Valyria. William thought about the information he read in the books he found in the labyrinth of Lorith. The entrance to this place, according to the book, was a big old tree that split in two. Its trunk somehow created the entrance door to the tomb, but it also served as a way to mask the entrance. The tree was exuberant, but even so, it was hidden in the middle of several other trees. It would be a bit complicated to find even having all the necessary information. "Sir, a pirate ship is following us," one of the sailors warned while signaling the location that the pirates were. "Can we get ashore before they reach us?" William asked again. He was already sick of fighting at sea. He needed to step on dry land. "Sadly no, sir, they're using a ship made of rare wood. They'll probably be here very quickly." The sailor spoke while denying with his head. "Okay, get the men ready," William replied as he began to walk toward the girls to inform them. Slowly William approached Danny's room, where the two girls were talking. Opening the door he was greeted with an accusing look from Danny. Trying to avoid the discomfort he spoke quickly. "Pirates are attacking us. Emily, stay here and take care of Danny." William spoke up and left quickly to wait for the attack. He didn't want to fight for no reason. It was better to give her the space to overcome it. As William was returning to the outside he saw that several arrows were stuck in several places on the ship. "They're already close," William shouted, still standing in the doorway without taking his head out. Even if he didn't die easily, who would want to turn on a porcupine? "No, sir, they're far away, but their bows are really good." A sailor who was taking shelter behind a little protection answered him. "Any wounded?" William asked as he tried to assess the situation. "No, sir, we've been waiting for that, so everyone's taken cover." The sailor spoke as he crawled elsewhere. William shook his head and then tried to smell them in an attempt to create his mind map, but unfortunately, they were still far away. "Shit, because at sea the range of smells ends up being limited," William complained. For some reason when they were at sea the range of scents he could smell was severely reduced to at least 60% of what he could feel. After a while, some grunts of pain and the smell of blood had appeared. Some wounded, bad news. Even though they were undercover, these bows were very strong and with the bad luck of some sailors, their protections were eventually destroyed. Even so, the wounded were not serious, they just hurt a lot. "They're here," shouted one of the sailors. William looked quickly at the pirate ship and saw that they were at the right distance. Several ropes had been thrown towards his ship and the pirates were splitting into a group that would invade and one that would cover with their arrows. The sailors began to get agitated. It was almost time for the conflict to really happen. And then a war cry from the Lycans emerged. Lycans. After the screams, dozens of Lycans turned and attacked the pirate ship. The Lycans jumped and climbed the ship, killed everything ahead. The pirates were surprised and scared. Some screams were heard and everything was slowly returning to calm. William ended up watching the scene. The pirates were good archers, but terrible warriors and afraid. The moment the Lycans attacked, they all gave up their lives. Frozen by the novelty, only a few were able to react and with their bows wounded several Lycans. Fortunately, it was just the wood. There was no silver. Even though this wood was very resistant and good to drill, they only ended up hurting most of the affected Lycans. Unlucky for those pirates, this ship was full of Lycans and their strategies did not work. Danny's protection function was actually a way to prevent her from seeing the Lycans. It was too early for her. Maybe she was terrified. There were many variables, and the problem was that she was currently upset with William, all indications being that she wouldn't react well to this new information. The pirate ship was quickly plundered as were several others who dared to attack this ship, and luckily for William, this ship had a good number of good bows made of rare wood and a considerable amount of arrows. The price of these things was very good, but he would use them to equip some sailors. Unfortunately, there were not enough sailors to use the two ships, and the pirate ship was not suitable for William's needs. Finally, they decided to abandon the ship adrift, even if it was a small waste because it could be sold for a good price. There was nothing to do. A few hours later, they were already docked near a beach and were going with small boats to the beach. Most of the sailors would stay on the ship, look for supplies, and trade goods with the people of the island. A small group would be responsible for taking the supplies William's crew needed. The entrance to the tomb turned out to be easy to find. Many of the smaller trees had been felled and the larger ones had been preserved, and this one, in particular, attracted much attention because of its artificially arched shape. To William's surprise, the entrance gate to the tomb was exposed and apparently many people tried to break into it. Luckily, no one had been able to enter. "This is it?" Emily asked as he approached and looked at the marks that scratched the entrance. Danny was curious and approached and began to pass his hand on some symbols of little dragons that were encrusted and untouched. They were beautiful symbols, a work of art, but unfortunately, those who tried to invade didn't care and most were destroyed. I think so, William replied as he read the book for more information. Ouch. Danny let out a little cry of pain. What is it? Emily approaches to see what is happening. Before Danny can answer, the entry shakes and opens slowly. What have you done? William asks as he approaches. He was curious to see. I ran my hand over the drawings and ended up cutting my finger, Danny replies as she shows the little wound on her finger. Apparently, her blood turned out to be the key to entry. Is that all the blood was needed for? That confused William. It shouldn't be in the lobby, it should be in the vault that the blood was needed. Perhaps the information was too inaccurate. Are we going in? Emily asks as she looks suspiciously at the entrance. Yes, that's why we came after all. William answers as he leaves behind a backpack with supplies. He returns with one large backpack and two small ones. Just the three of us are going in. There's a small number of supplies inside those backpacks and enough for a month for 3 people. William speaks as he delivers the 2 smaller backpacks to them. 1 month. Are we gonna be there all that time? Danny asks while she was surprised. She thought it would be quick. Don't be frightened, Will usually exaggerates. Emily talks as he lets out a little laugh to reassure that little sister. It's no exaggeration, it's just to be safe. William tries to defend himself. They don't know what they're gonna find in there after all. Got it. Danny answers while ignoring William's excuse. Why are things like this? William wonders. It was so unfair to him. He wasn't the evil wolf, was he? William left some orders for his men and began to enter the tomb. After a few hours walking, the corridor began to change and from a path built something like a cave began to appear in front of them. Why did it stay that way? Emily stops and stares at this strange change. There was no point in having a marble corridor or something like that until now, and after that, it was a raw stone from a mine or cave. I have no idea, but let's continue more carefully, William replies as he looks around. He feels something is near them. Here it stinks, it smells very strange, Danny complains as she tries to cover her nose with a cloth. It's a tomb, it's been closed too long, it must be normal, William tries to justify the reason for the stench. It was a very nauseating smell, but luckily, the Lycans had some form of resistance to strong smells. It was an advantage because if they didn't, they'd be screwed. They walked a few more meters, but then William stopped and motioned for them to stop and be quiet. He walked a few forward and looked around. Shit, there's something here. William began to analyze the environment and could see traces of something. He began to walk towards a rock carefully, and he bent down and picked something up and began to think. Emily was holding hands with Danny, who was frightened by William's actions. She began to walk and wanted to ask what was happening, but then a low, pig-like scream sounded in the distance. William, what's happening? Emily couldn't resist and broke the silence in search of the answer. William stands up and shows what was in his hand. A skull. Danny asks in surprise the thing that was in William's hand. But shouldn't it have been a tunnel sealed a long time ago? Emily asks as he approaches to get a better look. The skull was as small as a 10-year-old skull and the jaw was a bit elongated, all the teeth were sharp, she didn't know what it was. What's this skull, Will? Emily asks with curiosity. William just looks around and doesn't answer her. Danny gets agitated and starts holding Emily's clothes. What's going on? Danny asks in a frightened voice. William slowly turns around and looks at them both. I don't know what it is. But I know still have these things here, and they're coming, William said in surprise. There are many hidden creatures in God folklore. I will use some of them, especially those that would emerge from the experiments that the Valyrians did. It's interesting to think that there is this in the history of God, but like anything else, it's told in myths and legends, they all end up being in stories about a distant time. I'm going to take this opportunity to do a little RPG-style adventure. I think it matches the world and I can also test my writing skills on this element of adventure in action. I'll try to write 3 chapters tomorrow so the story doesn't stand still. See you tomorrow, guys. Laughing face. IngloriusEnd creators' thoughts. 16 comments, 0 vote. Strange creatures 2. The 3 of them had been walking for some time. The screaming sounds were slowly getting closer to them. Danny sometimes asked them to come back. The light from the torches wasn't enough to drive away their fear of the unknown. William tried to comfort her by saying that it was all for the better and that the danger shouldn't be too great, since it was a closed tunnel that wouldn't have much food, so it would have few of these creatures. And because of the size of the skull they found, William said they were probably small creatures who would be frightened when they saw them. But those were just empty words. William knew that because these creatures were confined in such a rough place, they must have developed to be more cruel and aggressive. Slowly William's lines were denied by the environment. For some reason, the more they walked the wider the path became and at some small points tunnels appeared on the walls. Luckily, these tunnels were too small, and with that, it was unlikely that it was the main road, they were not in danger of getting lost. The upside of all this was that Danny started to get closer to him. Of course, she wanted to feel safe, but this action of hers helped to make things easier to resolve. William was walking as he held a short sword in his right hand and a torch in his left. From time to time he smelled it in the air to see if there were any creatures around. Several times he felt that inside these tunnels, which surrounded them, some was being who remained silent, watching them. At first he prepared for the conflict, but the creatures that were hiding just stood still. It seemed as if they were waiting for something. Will, I don't want to be in this place for a month. Emily spoke as she looked away. She wasn't too scared, but it was horrible to have to stay in such a damp, stinking place for so long. Neither did I, but the purpose of this mission is very important. William responds as he sighs in a stressed out mood. Even if he wasn't afraid, it was really stressful to be in such a closed environment and being watched by God knows what. Think, at the end of it all the dragons will come back into existence. William was trying to put a little glitter in the middle of this strange atmosphere. Emily remained silent. She didn't know what she wanted anymore. This place stank after all. For the dragons. Danny, who had been quiet for a long time, spoke with a little willpower. The goal of this mission was something so magical that this place would explode. How long are we here? Emily, who was a little more convinced by the purpose of the mission, asked with doubts, but it was something difficult to answer. I have no idea, but soon it will be time for us to stop and rest, William said as he continued his vigilance. It was hard to know how long it had been, for they were in a dark place without even a point of reference, could only be guided by Danny's fatigue and his desire for food. It was much harder to be guided by the Lycans' senses when speaking of time, for they were much more resilient, and William, for example, if he wished, he could go days or even weeks without sleep. His sense of time was fucked. After a few steps William stopped and signaled for them to stop. Some of these things were shyly moving toward them. It would be the first contact between them. One of them is coming here, William whispered to alert them. Emily held tight to his sword and Danny hid behind the two of them. Calm down, he's not attacking. William whispered again. The smell was their first contact with this being, and it had to be said, they stank a lot. It was a level far beyond the stench of a fish or an animal that had been dirty for a long time. The smell was very rancid. The creature was using the stones as a cover and carefully it was getting closer. When this creature arrived in William's field of vision, he felt like throwing up. He was a very disgusting being. It was a humanoid, but it walked with its 4 limbs, its body was small and thin, it looked skeletal, its arms were long and thin, its arms were at a strange angle, it resembled the paws of a spider. The skin of this creature was light gray and slimy, it seemed to have some kind of goo wrapped around some parts. Its face was the strangest thing possible. Its face reminded the face of a person, but it was in a young shape and at the same time wrinkled like an old man. Its eyes were big and wide, but the color was gray, probably blind. This creature had a few hairs, but they were few and scattered, and his ear was big and pointed. This creature's mouth was big and without lips. It kept its mouth a little open and a triangular tongue came out from time to time. For a simple view and you could say that this creature was the mixture of Gollum and a Falmer. It was a strange and very ugly being. He's very ugly, don't be frightened. If he doesn't attack we'll leave him alone. William warned the girls about the creature's appearance and at the same time signaled that they shouldn't attack him just because he was an ugly creature. After all, it wasn't just because he was ugly as misfortune that he deserved to die, right? The creature gained more courage and began to walk faster in their direction, but he was still careful. Soon he arrived in Danny's vision and she held on not to scream. These things came from someone's nightmares. Horrible, it was impossible not to feel scared. The creature stared at the 3 of them and raised its head as it tried to smell them. William and Emily prepared to defend themselves if the creature attacked them. The creature approached William wanting to touch him, but suddenly it stopped and retreated in fear. He felt something and prepared to flee. Realizing that these strangers didn't move, he became interested again, but he didn't dare approach that being. He felt extreme danger when he approached. Sniffing the air, the creature began to walk towards Danny. The girl was terrified of this action and tried to hide behind Emily. Don't let him come near me, Danny was talking scared. The creature was still trying to reach her. No, Emily moved and blocked the path of the creature. With the fright the creature retreated. The creature was scared, but still had an interest in Danny. Perhaps it feels that Danny has Valyrian blood. It inquired William while it realized the interest of the creature for Danny. Or maybe he just wants to eat her because she's the most fragile, Emily answered protectively. She had the sword ready to send that creature to hell. Could be, William agreed as he approached the creature. Send him away, Danny spoke as he tried to get as far away from the creature as possible. William got tired of the creature and amazed her. That being didn't seem to want to attack them, so it was better not to kill him. The creature got scared and ran away, but after a few feet, he stopped and kept looking at them. The trio started walking while the creature followed them from afar. After a while, without any further encounters, William decided to stop. Danny was already very tired and hungry. "Let's eat fruit today," William spoke as he thought the smell of roast beef might bring trouble. "I want some meat," protested Emily as he looked with doubts at William. Danny supported Emily's speech with his look. "Maybe the smell attracts more of those things," William spoke as he pointed to the creature that followed them from a distance. Emily's senses weren't as good as William's, so she didn't realize that the creature was still around, but when William spoke she could see the creature. She took a stone and threw it at the creature, trying to scare it. "That shit's still here," she was cursing while throwing other stones. William looked at her action, and even though he didn't want to hurt the creature, he didn't care about the creature either, so he let Emily do what he wanted. "I want a fruit." Danny, who was scared of one of those creatures, certainly didn't want another one to appear, and knowing that strange being was around, she agreed with William's idea. "Fuck them, I don't care about them, I want meat, and if those things come we'll kill them." Emily spoke as she became angry, and in addition to suffering from the stench, they would have to restrict their diet because of these ugly things. "No fucking way." "Are you sure?" William asked as he stared at the creature. Even if it was strange, it seemed harmless, maybe it wouldn't be a problem to have others with it. "But I don't want others to come," protested the little white-haired girl. "Don't be afraid, look, they are cowards." Emily approached Danny and pointed to the fleeing creature. Danny couldn't see, but Emily's line was accepted. They then ended up preparing a dignified meal with meat and other foods, and as a result, other creatures were looking at them from afar. "It must be 20. Emily spoke in surprise at the number of creatures looking at them from afar. "No, there are at least 50, William spoke as he gazed at those who were farthest away. Most of these creatures were like the first one they saw, but among them, there was a bigger one, almost twice the size, and one thing caught William's attention. Unlike the other beings who did not appear to have a gender, without sex organs, the bigger creature had a male organ. The other creatures acted in fear surrounded by this one, and at some point, this bigger creature attacked a smaller one and ate it. After it moved away, the others attacked the remains of the body and devoured them to the bones. They were cannibals of their own people. "It's getting dangerous, we must go faster," William spoke as he watched another of these larger beings emerge. "But I'm exhausted. I need to sleep," Danny spoke as she stared into the darkness, listening to the sound of these creatures and becoming afraid. Emily, who was looking at the creatures, regrets her choice. Things were stranger now. "Maybe we should kill them. It might get complicated if we don't decrease their numbers." Emily talks as she points her eyes at Danny. If more of these things came up and decided to attack them, it would be hard for them to keep Danny protected. She was sorry for her actions. She never thought so many of these beings would live here. William listened to Emily's speech and thought about what to do, but then things forced him to act. Several other of these male creatures appeared and the small ones fled. The larger ones were more aggressive and were preparing to attack them. "They will attack us," William speaks as he prepares for the conflict. One of the 3 chapters I want to post today has been released. About the creatures. The Valyrians were doing a lot of experiments. Among these was the reproduction of humans with creatures. Then many humanoid beings appeared and their forms are unknown, only these experiments are cited. The creatures are basically like I imagine this mixture would be. I need a name for these creatures. Do you have any suggestions? To call them creatures is strange, and I find it interesting that you choose the name if you want to give one. So if you want to give a name, say so and a little explanation of why that name would be good. If nobody wants to give a name, I'll make. IngloriusEnd creators' thoughts.